We call this press conference here today because of some serious issues in the African community around the police. We know it's an outstanding and ongoing problem with the police and the African community. Even if you started back when the murder of Tyron Lewis in 1996, that was the impetus for 2 rebellions, the murder of Jarrell Walker, murder of Javon Dawson in 2008. This is an ongoing contradiction. It didn't just start when the police got on their police radios talking about black people and how they chase people in the city of St. Petersburg. It didn't just start there. So we have brought some families and some victims of police terror in the African community to this meeting today to talk about some of these issues. We also brought Comrade Jesse Neville from the African People's Solidarity Committee. So who we're going to have speaking here today is Debbie Newkirk, and she will be discussing issues with her brother and the Sheriff's Department. He is in some very serious trouble. He was shot 6 times, and she's going to be talking about that. We also have Jesse Neville from the African People's Solidarity Committee, a force of white people struggling for black power in the white community. And we have Comrade Jennoris Green, who, by the way, was a victim of police terror right here in this park, in this very spot. That's where it happened. So we call this press conference here today at that spot where Jennoris was attacked, because we think that it would have a lot of impact in terms of how people understand this situation with the police. This is a colonial occupation, no less than what they had in South Africa. And when we say occupation, the only thing that we can get more of in the African community is more police. We can't get economic development, we can't get no jobs, we can't get no businesses, but they give us a lot of police. And we say it's time to change that. African people need economic development. So with no further ado, I'm going to call up Debbie Newkirk. She's going to give a brief statement about her brother, Anthony. And then I'm going to call up Jesse Neville from the African People's Solidarity Committee. And then I'll call up Jennoris Green. And then Diop Olagbalo, who is the international president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Thank you.
Uhuru. I am the sister of Anthony Newkirk. My brother never sold a gun a day in his life. Just bear with me for a minute. I am coming before all of you today to fight for my brother's rights, because he did not have to be shot up by the sheriff officers. The officer shot my brother 6 times, twice in the jaw, twice in the chest, and also in his rib cage. And my family feel that they tried to kill my brother. And now he is being held in the Pinellas County Jail and is not doing well. His mouth is wired shut, and he can't eat, have to drink through a straw with Ensure and orange juice. He had to have a whole jaw replacement, and he is not getting the proper treatment and the medical care that he needs in the county jail. Now he has an infection in his shoulder blade and also in his chest. My brother is suffering in the county jail, and that is not fair at all. And he is in a lot of pain as we speak, so please help me through this struggle and fight with me for his rights. And he is also being held in the county jail with no bond, and me and my family feel that's not fair at all, because there are people around us as we speak driving around with no license. As we speak, so tell me, where is the justification with the people that are driving around here as we speak? as I come to you today in the behalf of my dad, Raymond Newkirk, and my mom, Betty Newkirk, that are both not well. I'm suffering from high blood pressure myself, but I'm fighting for my brother's rights. My brother has 4 kids out here as we speak, Alasia, June, Paris, and Brianna, and they need their father. And I also need my brother. So as I come to the Uhuru people today and the rest of you, please help me fight through this struggle. Uhuru.
Thank you, Debbie. So I want to call up Jesse Neville, who is a leading member of the African People's Solidarity Committee. This is a North American or white group that works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party in the white community, building for African liberation and black power in the white community. So I want to call up Jesse Neville.
Uhuru. Uhuru. I just want to start off by saying, as a representative of the African People's Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement, that we stand completely with the Newkirk family in this struggle to get justice for the brutal attack by the police on Anthony Newkirk. And as Chimurenga mentioned, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is an organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And we organize in our own white communities in solidarity with the struggle of the African community for economic development, self-determination, and reparations. And we are here today to condemn completely the outrageous attacks by the St. Pete police against the African population of this city. What happened to Anthony Newkirk, what happened to Jennoris Green in this park, where he was harassed and violated by the police, would never happen to a white person sitting on a bench in a park in downtown St. Pete. What happened to President Diop Olugbala, who was arrested for supposedly riding his bicycle on the wrong side of the road, would never happen to all of the white people that ride their bikes up and down the sidewalks of Central Avenue. So we recognize that these 3 incidents that we're talking about are not isolated incidents, and the police that carried out these attacks were not bad apples. This is a result of a public policy of police containment. This is a system that starves the African community, provides no economic development whatsoever, and then criminalizes the community for struggling to survive. They pump the communities full of police, and then they tell us that the police are here to stop crime, which we know is a lie, because if the police were really trying to stop crime, then they would be raiding the USF dorms, which is where most of the drugs in the community are. Uhuru. So as white residents of this city, we are here to say that we're sick and tired of living in a situation, in a city where there are 2 realities, one at the expense of the other. A lifestyle of luxury, safety, and opportunity for us white people at the expense of a constant daily experience of state-sponsored violence, terror, and brutality imposed on the African community. We are not with the police. We cannot stand by idly while these criminals carry out atrocities in our name for our benefit. We are on the side of the African community. We stand with the Uhuru Movement. The police and the city cannot rely on us for complicity and support, not anymore. We unite with the demands put forth by the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and we say to the mayor, if you really want to lead this city in a way that creates positive change, then you have to answer these critical questions. How will you stop the police from killing black people? How will you support the initiatives of the African community to build genuine economic development as the real solution? We demand answers to these questions, and we will not be silent until these questions are addressed. Just as InPDUM is organizing in the African community, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement will be organizing in the white community, building a people's movement for reparations to African people. Finally, I just want to say that the police containment of this community is proof that, as the Uhuru Movement has said, it's not enough for us to just speak out against racism. This is colonialism that we're talking about. It is a social system built on slavery and genocide for the benefit of white people everywhere. We call on all of our members and supporters of Uhuru Solidarity Movement nationally and locally to support the work of InPDUM to stop the police violence against the African community. We call on all white people and allies everywhere to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and come to the 6th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. A change is coming to the city of St. Petersburg. We urge you to be a part of it. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Jesse. So I want to bring up Jennoris Green, who in this very park was attacked by the police in this very park. And I also want to say that the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement is calling on the state to drop every charge that they have created, fabricated, framed up on Jennoris Green. So I want to call up Jennoris, give a brief statement, then we'll go on to the Speaker Diop Olugbalo, who is the International President of InPDUM. Uhuru.
I'm Jennoris Green. I be at this park every day. One morning I was walking through the park. I seen a young brother that was in help, so I asked him, was he all right? So the officer had told me, I'm obstructing justice. So I asked the officer, what's discretion? So he didn't say nothing. So me and him had words. So as I try to leave, he tell me I can't go nowhere. So I'm asking him, sir, why I can't go nowhere? He saying, you just gotta sit here. So I sat down. So I had to think about it. I asked him, was I'm under arrest? He said no. So as I get up, he takes me down in the arm bar. So we on the ground wrestling. And so I get up, I stays there until the other officers get there. So they took me to jail. So actually, so they took me to jail for seeing about another brother that was in hurt, and they couldn't tell me nothing. So we want to know what's going on, and we tired of it in our community, and we want the police out of here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennoris. I think Jennoris' case is clear that what the police do in the African community is occupy our community. This has nothing to do with the law, because they don't even follow the rules that they say they have. Clearly, they attacked Jennoris without any provocation at all, and Jennoris is a victim, another colonial victim in the African community. So right now, I want to call up the international president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, who has also been a victim of the St. Petersburg Police Department. And I think his case is indicative of how the police occupy our communities. And when he tells his story, you will be shocked. And I think that the African community won't be shocked, but the media might be, because it happens every day. Our people have to ride bicycles in poverty, and they get stopped on bicycles, accused of all kind of crazy charges. So with no further ado, I want to call up the international president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, Diop Olugbalo.
Uhuru. I want to first of all thank Comrade Chimurenga for hosting this press conference in the local branch of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. We are a worldwide organization that fights for power in the hands of African people. We recognize that the stories that we're hearing right now that are happening in Silver Lake Park are not unlike the stories being told by African people all over the world who are victims of an ongoing colonial war at the hands of the U.S. government as well as European governments. And we are an organization committed to overturning this relationship, not through winning the approval of our oppressors, but by getting organized for power in our own hands. And that is what is happening today. Currently, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, led by the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, is leading the struggle to win justice for at least 3 victims of terror at the hands of police forces in St. Pete and Pinellas County. These are all incidents that have occurred within the last 2 months, where the police have used quote-unquote extra legal means as well as brutal means of arresting African people in this community. First, as we heard, is the case of Jennoris Green, an African who was savagely beaten and arrested by St. Pete police simply for intervening in the police harassment of another African. The police beat Jennoris And at that point, bystanders, including members of the Uhuru Movement, began to take out their video camera phones and record this brutality. The police confiscated the camera phones and inaccurately stated that it is illegal to record the police while they are arresting or brutalizing somebody. If it was not for the intervention of the Uhuru Movement, the camera phones would have never been retrieved, and the evidence of this attack on Jennoris and the African community would have been forever gone. And we do have the video footage in question that can be found on our website. Then there's the case of Anthony Newkirk, a 32-year-old African man who was shot 6 times, as Sister Debbie stated, by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, twice in the face, once in the chest. In the process of the Sheriff's Department's attempt to arrest Newkirk, Newkirk. Since his capture, Anthony has been denied medical attention. He currently has a bullet lodged in his rib cage. Infections induced by the bullet entry wounds are now festering. After inquiring about when Anthony will be taken to the hospital for treatment, his family was told that basically it's none of their business and they don't have to tell them. At the same time, Anthony has been denied bail based on the fact that he was arrested and charged for so-called driving without a license a few months ago. Because he was recently arrested, and although the state was willing to grant him bail for his most recent charges, the state has insisted on holding Anthony captive under these life-threatening conditions. Despite the fact that he has deep roots in the community, as well as small children, several small children, who he takes to school multiple times a week, the state makes the ridiculous claim that Anthony is a flight risk. But what's really going on with Anthony's case is what the U.S. government and court system refers to as double jeopardy, where he's being locked up. First of all, without any trial. The purpose of bail is to allow for somebody to go to return to their community until they are convicted, at least given the chance to defend themselves in the court of law. But this right has been denied Anthony, as it is denied African people on an ongoing basis. And this is just one example of the colonial relationship that this court system has with African people. And then finally, there's the case of myself, Diop Olugbala, aka Wali Abdulrahman. On Wednesday, September 25th at 4:45 p.m., I was arrested while riding my bicycle on the south side of St. Petersburg, just blocks away from where we're currently standing right now. I turned the corner of 13th Street and 15th Avenue South, and I was stopped and interrogated by a white female cop named Jenna Price. She said that I was being detained, but could not explain why. I protested this detainment, knowing that I had done nothing wrong. And at that point, members of the community began to come out of their houses, and other members of the Uhuru Movement were alerted and immediately came to the scene, which was only 3 blocks away from the Uhuru house. InPDUM forces and community members demanded to know why I was being detained and interrogated. The cops refused to answer. The cops arrogantly told me to come over to the car. When I told the cops to come to where I stood and where the people stood, they grabbed me up, pushed me up against the car, and arrested me for reasons that I still don't know. To InPDUM, the case of Jennoris Green, Anthony Newkirk, and myself, Diop Olugbala, serve as examples of how the policies of the police, the prison, and the court system are not in place to facilitate growth and development for African people in this community, but the courts, the prisons, the police in our community to lock us up with impunity. As many Africans as possible, they lock up and they murder and brutalize those who resist. These assaults on our community are occurring in the midst of a firestorm of controversy with the St. Petersburg Police Department at its center. In fact, an expose was just published in the Tampa Tribune of the police CB radio communication in which they use cowboy lingo to describe their rabid pursuit of African life and limb. On a national scale, it is clear that the St. Petersburg Police Department and the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department are not unique. A recent study revealed that an African is murdered by the police every 28 hours in this country. That's 1 African murdered by the police every day. More Africans have been murdered by the police in this country than U.S. military troops have been killed in the U.S. war in Iraq since its beginning in 2001. So it's not hard to understand why Jennoris was so concerned with the livelihood of the brother he was defending from the police aggression, or why the family of Anthony Newkirk is in motion to make sure that he is released from the clutches of the Pinellas County Jail. The fact is, any encounter that we have with the police could very well result in the end of an African's life. But the murder of African people by the police is not the only, nor is it the most pervasive way in which the police terror affects Africans in this country. The fact is that the African community suffers, as it was said by speakers before me, a colonial military occupation at the hands of the police, not unlike the U.S. military occupation of places like Afghanistan and Iraq. Every policy and every action sanctioned by the police department, whether it's by a quote-unquote good cop or bad cop, is designed to facilitate this occupation. What would otherwise be referred to as racial profiling is in fact a product of military occupation of the African community, in which the entire occupation is treated like an enemy combatant population. In major cities like Philadelphia and New York, this policy is given the name stop and frisk, and it results in the harassment and detainment of millions of people, primarily young African men, like myself and Jennoris and Anthony Newkirk. Since the verdict of Johannes Mesley, the Oakland cop who murdered Oscar Grant, 680,000 people were stopped and frisked by the NYPD. 90% of them were African and Latino men. Among those stopped, only 5% were charged with possession of weapons, which was the clear motive of the stops. The police are well aware of the fact that African people have a real interest in resisting this occupation. And stop and frisk, and the stop when I was riding my bike down the street, and what happened to Jennoris and what happened to Anthony Green, Newkirk, is a response by the police to the reality that Africans can and must resist this occupation and this oppression. According to an ACLU study in Philadelphia, the police stopped and frisked 250,000 people in the year 2009, 75% of whom were African and Latino, the vast majority of whom were not even charged for the reasons that the police gave for stopping them in the first place. Mainstream media pundits and government officials have promoted the idea that the solution to police brutality and racial profiling should be sought through the Internal Affairs Department of the police, or the newly elected mayoral administration, now led by Kreisman. That's his name, Kreisman? Rick Kreisman. However, InPDUM is clear that while the heads of both City Hall and the police department have changed many times over the last several decades, one thing has not changed, and that is the brutality and the anti-African nature of the police in this city. In fact, it was Internal Affairs that made public the police radio transcripts exposing the hostile, occupying army nature of police practices in the African community. Yet they have done nothing to change the organizational relationship that the police have with African people in the city. Therefore, InPDUM is clear that it is up to African people ourselves to take power and matters into our own hands. This is why the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement is holding this press conference to announce our plans to take matters into our own hands. We are clear that the police will not stop their attacks on black people until black people have built a movement for black power. Therefore, InPDUM will be participating in the upcoming 6th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, a process through which the black community will meet not only in St. Petersburg, but Africans around the world will converge right here in St. Petersburg, Florida, to engage in a discussion on how this problem will be dealt with, independent from the confines of the U.S. legal and court system. This 5-day Congress is a manifestation of the will of African people to be a self-governing people, to be in control of our own lives, our own governments, our own court systems, and yes, our own police, whose task will be to protect and defend the African community from these terroristic occupying forces that are known as the St. Petersburg Police Department. Part of the work of the African People's Socialist Party has included the World Tribunal, or Court for Black Justice and Reparations, through which we have put the U.S. government on trial on numerous occasions for the intensifying war crimes being committed against African people, as defined by the UN International Criminal Court, as well as our own Revolutionary National Democratic Program. The criminal exploits of the U.S. government is coming under increasing scrutiny as heads of state from countries including Bolivia and Iran have called for the U.S. government to be placed on trial by a people's court. InPDUM and the African People's Socialist Party stand with these international forces in our indictment of the U.S. government as the real #1 criminal and terrorist in the world today. And that is what we will be doing through our upcoming 6th Congress and the Court for Black Justice, which will serve as a public hearing through which the people, those who are with us today and those who are victims of similar police attacks, will be allowed to testify against what the police do to African people in this city on an ongoing basis. For more information on the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement or the 6th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, we encourage everybody to visit our website, which is apspcongress.org and inpdum.org, INPDUM.org. Again, I want to thank the local St. Petersburg branch of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement for organizing this press conference. And I want to give a special recognition and salute to the brave, the courageous Africans who have stood with us today. Brother Jennoris Green, the family of Anthony Newkirk, Sister Debbie Newkirk, who in the midst of all types of stress and drama has persevered along with the family to stand not only for justice and freedom for her brother, but for justice and freedom for the African community. We say the police must leave the African community. We call for African community control of police. We call for the immediate imprisonment of these terrorists and criminals that continue to attack African people. Uhuru.